Following our fight, my husband forced me from the car onto the highway, abandoning me directly in the relentless downpour. Shivering uncontrollably from the cold, I noticed a black SUV slow to a stop. An elderly man got out and spoke quietly. "Come on in, little one. Just act like you're my family, and I'll assist you in ways your husband could never dream of." Welcome everyone to the Twists of Fate channel. Before we start, please leave a comment telling us where you are tuning in from. We're curious to find out. Now we hope you enjoy this enthralling tale. Kaylani gripped her soaked handkerchief tightly. She gazed through the side window as thick raindrops raced down the pane obscured by the gray veil of the storm. Trees along the road blurred by. The atmosphere in the car was suffocatingly tense, so much she longed to open a window, just to take a gulp of fresh air, yet she didn't dare to move. "Do you have any idea what you were saying back there?" Cordell's tone was a quiet, menacing hiss, a sound he reserved for when he was furious. "My mother asks about your job. A simple, courteous question, and you begin complaining you're tired." "I was not complaining," Kaylani replied softly, keeping her gaze fixed on the window. "I only mentioned that I've been very busy recently." "Busy?" Cordell struck the steering wheel with force, causing Kaylani to recoil. "You stay at home taking a couple of freelance jobs online, and that's what you consider busy. At your age, my mother raised 2 children alone, worked back-to-back shifts, and never once complained." Kaylani bit her lip. Arguing was pointless. She had learned that lesson long ago. Cordell possessed a talent for distorting her words until she alone shouldered all the blame. 3 years prior, when they were newlyweds, it was all so different. He would call her his queen and bring her bouquets, taking her to cozy soul food restaurants, declaring she was the most gorgeous and brilliant woman he had ever known. Then something shattered, perhaps just after the wedding, or perhaps over time. Kaylani could no longer recall. That phony smile, too. Cordell pressed on, accelerating the car on the slick asphalt. "You think my mother doesn't notice? That you're just feigning enthusiasm, that you act superior to my family. Can you imagine what that makes you look like to others?" "Cordell, I honestly did my best." Kaylani faced him, her voice cracking with fatigue. "I prepared the potato salad just the way your mother prefers. I spoke with everyone I assisted in the kitchen. I truly tried." He responded with a cruel laugh. "There was too much paprika in that salad. My mother mentioned it to me later. She just stayed quiet to avoid hurting your feelings. And you spoke as if you were being interrogated. Just, yes, no, I don't know. My sister brings up books, you have nothing to add. TV shows, you haven't seen them. Sports, you're not interested. So, what on earth is anyone supposed to talk to you about?" Kaylani dropped her head. She had truly felt unwell all night. Her head was throbbing, and she fought against persistent waves of sickness. For the past several weeks, her sleep had been poor. She'd awaken in the dead of night filled with anxiety, then rise in the morning completely drained. But she never mentioned any of this to Cordell. It wasn't as if he would have understood. He would just claim she was inventing issues out of nothing at all. "I am just exhausted," she whispered, truly exhausted. "Exhausted from what?" Cordell's voice boomed. "I'm the one paying the rent for this condo. I cover all the bills. I rescued you from that tiny apartment in the projects where you and your mother shared one room. Can you even recall that? The state you were simply existing in. Now you have a proper home, a life, and you're tired." Kaylani swallowed hard. He always hurled her past in her face, her humble beginnings. The gratitude she was meant to feel with every single breath she took. Yes. She and her mother shared a small flat in a tough neighborhood. Money was scarce, but it felt like a warm and loving home. Her mother never raised her voice, never demeaned her, or made her feel worthless. "Cordell, let's not argue," she pleaded, a knot tightening in her throat. "Please, I know you're angry, but—" "Angry?" He whipped his head toward her, with fury blazing in his eyes. "I'm not upset, Kaylani. I'm furious. You are an embarrassment to me. My parents welcome us, prepare a feast, and you just sit there like a statue, poisoning the entire atmosphere. I didn't ruin anything." Kaylani felt a small piece of her spirit break. I just had nothing to say. Your sister was talking about some lavish resort she visited in Cabo. That's a world away from me. Your mother was discussing the renovations for the lake house. I know nothing about that. What did you want from me? I listened, I nodded, I tried to ask questions. Cordell struck the steering wheel again. Just fake some interest for heaven's sake. Is that so difficult? My family is your family now, don't you forget it. Kaylani turned to face the window. A gray, wet void rushed past the window, the road, the trees, the rain, empty of cars or lights. They were on the long stretch of highway connecting his parents' wealthy suburb with the city lights. With another 20 miles left to endure, Kaylani pictured arriving home, washing the day away, slipping into bed and shutting her eyes. Perhaps tomorrow might be better. Perhaps tomorrow. Cordell would calm down and they could speak rationally. Are you even hearing me? He snapped. I'm listening. Kailani replied, exhausted. Doesn't seem like it. Cordell pressed the gas and the needle on the dash began to climb. You've been in your own little world lately. When I speak, you say nothing. When I ask a question, you're not all there. What is your problem? Nothing. Kailani shut her eyes, just exhausted. Exhausted again. Cordell let out a cruel, bitter laugh. You know what your problem is, Kalani. You are simply ungrateful. I give you everything. And you can't manage basic decency for my parents. What does respect have to do with it? Kalani's voice shook. I do respect your parents. I always try. Oh, don't give me that I try garbage. He cut her off. Results are what matter, not your effort. And the result is, my mother thinks you're odd, and my sister thinks you're a snob. And my father says nothing, but I can read his expression. He's disappointed in you. Kaylani felt hot tears welling in her eyes. She refused to cry before him, not here, but she lacked the strength to stop it. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Then a second. And here we go, Cordell sneered. The waterworks right on cue. When you run out of arguments, you just start sobbing. I'm not sobbing. Kaylani quickly swiped at her face. I just don't comprehend what you want from me. I try so hard, I truly do. But nothing is ever enough for you. Because you are never enough, Cordell roared, and Kaylani flinched once more. You live in a fantasy world where everyone should pity and understand you, but the reality is, you're selfish. I work myself to the bone to provide for us. Yet you can't handle one civil evening with my family. Kaylani's fists clenched. A tide was rising in her, not of anger, but of terrible despair. She recalled how they had met 3 years before, at the diner where she was a waitress. Cordell had seemed so assured, successful, and so very grown up. He was 8 years her senior, drove a fine car, and courted her exquisitely. She was young, naive, and tired of struggling, yearning for stability. When he asked her to move in with him and then to be his wife, she agreed in a heartbeat. But the fairy tale shattered. Cordell was someone else entirely. He was demanding, controlling, and hypercritical. He belittled everything she did and constantly reminded her of her debt to him, and she just endured it silently, hoping it was a temporary phase that he would change. Maybe you ought to find somebody else then, Kaylani said softly, disbelieving her own words. Someone who gets along better with your parents. Cordell's head whipped toward her. What did you just say? I said maybe you require a different kind of wife. Kaylani faced him, pain fracturing her voice. Because I'm apparently not capable. Not capable? He sneered. You make no attempt to be capable. You just drift along waiting for me to resolve everything for you. That's not fair, Kaylani cried out, startled by the sheer volume of her own voice. I do everything I'm able to. I clean, I cook, I support you whenever you have issues with your contracts. But it's never good enough. You always find a flaw to point out. Cordell veered violently onto the shoulder, and the car lurched to a halt. A flaw. This isn't called finding a flaw, it's called pointing out your imperfections. But of course it is much easier for you to say, I'm finding fault. They sat on the deserted highway, rain pounding the roof. Kaylani was breathing in ragged gasps, her heart hammering in her chest. You know what? Cordell pivoted his entire body to face her, a cold rage shimmering in his eyes. Get out. What? Kaylani couldn't comprehend. I said get out now. He jabbed a thumb toward the door. Get out of this car. Walk. Maybe by the time you've walked home, your mind will be in a better place. Cordell? You're not serious. A terrible chill crept down Kaylani's spine. It's a downpour. We are in the middle of a highway. So. He smiled coldly. You're so independent and unhappy, so leave. 6 or 7 miles to the city limits is not that great a distance. Cordell, please? Kaylani's voice was shaking. Don't do this. Let's just go home. And calm down. I am calm, he snapped. I'm just fed up with your drama. Get out. Kaylani gazed at him with wide, shocked eyes. Was he for real? Was he actually going to abandon her here in this downpour on a deserted road? Get out now! He roared so loudly that Kaylani flinched yet again. With trembling hands, she finally unbuckled her seatbelt. Inside, her entire being collapsed into a ball of fear, hurt, and despair. She reached for the door handle, still praying he might stop her, call it a cruel prank, but Cordell just stared resolutely straight ahead. With her jaw tight, Kaylani forced the door open, letting a blast of cold air and mist invade the car's interior. She stepped onto the road's shoulder and was drenched in an instant. The rain was a thick, heavy curtain hammering down on her, head and shoulders flooding her vision. Kaylani glanced back at the vehicle, praying Cordell might have a change of heart, but he refused to even look her way. He simply shifted gears and the car sped off, dousing Kaylani with muddy water from a puddle. Kaylani stood stranded on the shoulder, her eyes fixed on the red taillights as they vanished into the dense gray curtain of rain. She hugged herself, a futile attempt to get warm, but the chill seeped deeper. Her clothes clung tightly to her body. Her hair was plastered in wet tendrils and water cascaded down her face. Not another living soul was in sight. Just the deserted highway flanked by woods on both sides and the relentless downpour. Kaylani began to trudge forward toward the distant city. Her soaked shoes made her feet slide, and each step became a monumental effort. She thought about the sheer unreality of it all, how none of this could possibly be happening. Yet the cold was too real, the rain too fierce, and the ache in her heart too piercing. After walking for roughly 20 minutes, she recognized her utter exhaustion. Her legs felt like lead weights, her breathing ragged, and her saturated clothes seemed to weigh a ton. She paused for a moment, steadying herself with a hand against a tree, and shut her eyes. A throbbing pain pulsed in her skull as dark spots danced in her vision. The rain showed no mercy, falling in a wall, transforming the world into a single gray canvas. Then abruptly she detected the hum of an engine from somewhere behind her. Kaylani turned to see headlights slicing through the downpour. The vehicle was advancing cautiously, almost deliberately, as though the driver were carefully surveying the road. Kaylani retreated further onto the shoulder, expecting absolutely nothing. Who would ever stop for a drenched stranger in this weather? But the vehicle, a large black SUV, came to an abrupt halt right beside her. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the driver's side door swung open and a man emerged. He was an older gentleman, perhaps in his 70s, dressed in a dark overcoat and a fedora. He stood tall, carrying himself with a straight back, despite his years, moving with an innate confidence. "Young lady," he called to Kaylani as he drew nearer. "What on earth are you doing out here by yourself in this weather?" Kaylani parted her lips to reply, but all that escaped was a sound caught somewhere between a strangled sob and a cough. She became aware that her entire frame was trembling from cold and shock. "You're freezing," the man observed, stepping closer. He studied her face, his gaze filled with unmistakable, genuine concern. "Did someone leave you here?" Kaylani could only nod, incapable of speaking a single word. Fresh tears traced paths down her cheeks, mingling with the rain. "Get in the car," he instructed softly but firmly. "Right now. You are soaked to the bone." He took her by the elbow, guiding her toward the SUV. Kaylani moved as if in a daze, not quite processing what was unfolding. The man opened the front passenger door and gently helped her climb inside. The cabin was warm, scented with rich leather and expensive cologne. Kailani collapsed into the seat, drawing a deep, shuddering breath. After the frigid rain, the warmth felt like salvation. The man circled the vehicle, got behind the wheel, and turned the heat to full blast. "You will be warm in a moment," he assured her. "Just a second." He then reached over into the back seat and retrieved a plaid blanket, wonderfully warm and soft. He gently draped it across Kailani's trembling shoulders. "All right, now take slow breaths. There's no need to speak if it's difficult." Kailani pulled the blanket tighter, feeling the shivering slowly subside. She gazed at her rescuer, his gray hair perfectly combed with deep lines etched around his eyes. Yet his eyes were sharp and focused, his hands were strong, and a luxury watch adorned his wrist. A suit inside a garment bag lay on the back seat, and a leather briefcase. Everything about him suggested he was a man of consequence. "Thank you," Kailani managed to utter in a raspy voice. "Thank you very much." "You don't need to thank me," he said, shaking his head. "I'm Sterling Vance. And may I ask your name?" "Kailani," she answered. "It's a genuine pleasure to meet you, Kailani." He offered his hand and she took it. His grip was reassuringly firm and warm. "May I ask what happened, if you don't mind sharing? I'm guessing it was a domestic dispute." Kailani nodded, looking down. "My husband forced me from the car after we had argued." "I understand." Sterling's brow furrowed as he glanced at the relentless downpour outside. "What sort of—" He trailed off, apparently seeking a gentler term. "Reckless man does it take to abandon a woman on the highway in this kind of weather?" Kailani said nothing. Foolish, cruel, selfish, a litany of words could describe Crudel's actions. But they all felt hollow now, sitting here in a warm vehicle beside a stranger who showed her more kindness than her own husband. "Are you traveling much further?" Sterling inquired. "To the city," Kailani replied softly. "Downtown is likely another 7 miles from here. I can drive you?" He agreed with a nod, but first— He paused, seemingly debating whether to continue speaking. Kailani regarded him with a curious expression. "There's something I need to ask you," Sterling eventually said, a hint of unease coloring his tone. "This may sound peculiar, perhaps even absurd, but it is of the utmost importance to me." "What is it?" Kailani inquired warily. Sterling pinched the bridge of his nose before turning to face her. "The thing is, in about an hour, I have an extremely vital meeting scheduled. A business dinner at a restaurant with prospective partners. It's an enormous deal, and so much is at stake. And one of the stipulations from my counterpart is that he needs to see I'm a family man who values strong familial bonds. Do you see what I'm getting at?" Kailani nodded deliberately, though her understanding was uncertain. "I typically bring my granddaughter to these gatherings," Sterling went on. "Amara is a very bright young woman. She's studying law over at Howard. She helps me project the proper image, a grandfather with his devoted granddaughter. Dependable, stable. But she fell ill today with a high fever, so I couldn't possibly ask her to attend. And this meeting is impossible to reschedule. The gentleman is flying abroad tomorrow, so you're asking me to—" Kailani felt a surge of utter confusion wash over her. "To pose as my granddaughter," Sterling completed her thought. "Simply sit with me, perhaps offer a few remarks if spoken to, nothing difficult. But it would be an immense favor to me." Kailani stared at him, attempting to discern if he was being serious, but his face was completely earnest. "I am aware of how insane this must sound," he continued. "A total stranger finds you on the road and then asks you to impersonate his family. It sounds like the opening of a thriller, doesn't it?" "Yes, it does. A bit," Kailani conceded, and for the first time that entire evening a faint smile could be heard in her voice. "But I assure you I'm not some lunatic or a swindler," Sterling reassured her. "I can show you my identification, a business card, anything you need. I am the owner of several construction firms and have resided in this city for 30 years. I've simply found myself in a predicament requiring assistance, and destiny has led me to you." Kailani remained silent, processing what he said. It was on one hand truly peculiar, and even risky to go with a stranger to partake in some convoluted plot. On the other hand, This man had undeniably saved her, provided warmth, offered aid, and his eyes held such truth that Kaylani found herself compelled to trust him. "So what's in this for me?" she asked, startled by her own boldness. Sterling gave an appreciative nod. "An excellent question. One should never agree to terms without knowing the reward. I can pay you in cash if you prefer. But frankly, I believe you require more than just a single payment at this moment." "What are you implying?" Kaylani's brow furrowed. "It's clear something grave has happened to you," Sterling said softly. "Your husband forced you from the car into this downpour. That speaks volumes, and from your eyes, I can tell this isn't the first time he has treated you with such disregard." Kaylani felt that familiar knot tighten in her throat again. She turned her gaze to the window, unwilling to reveal her tears. "It's not in my nature to abandon people in crisis," Sterling went on, "so if you help me tonight, I will help you in return. Genuinely help. A place to live, work, an attorney if necessary. I have the connections, the resources, and I am a man of my word." "But why?" Kaylani faced him, her voice laced with disbelief. "Why would you help a total stranger?" Sterling fell silent, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. He then spoke softly. "Years ago, my own daughter faced a similar circumstance. Her husband was a complicated man as well. He never struck her, no, but he belittled her, dominated her every move, and eroded all of her independence. So when she finally resolved to leave him, there was no one there to support her. I was consumed by my business then, blind to her struggles, and by the time I finally saw the truth, it was far too late. She returned to him feeling she had no other choice and endured another 10 years of torment before he finally abandoned her for another woman." Kaylani listened, her breath caught in her chest. "Ever since," Sterling continued, "I swore an oath to myself, if I see a woman in distress and I am able to intervene, then I must. It is my own personal penance, you could say. I failed to save my daughter then, but I can help others now, and this is not charity or some handout. It is simply what's right." Kaylani gazed at him, and a profound shift occurred within her. This man spoke with such simple, raw honesty it was impossible to doubt him. "All right," she murmured softly. "I'll do it. I will be your granddaughter for the evening." Sterling turned towards her, a genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time. "Thank you, Kaylani. You have my word, I will not disappoint you." He changed gears and the car pulled away smoothly. Rain continued to beat against the roof, but inside the car there was warmth and calm. Kaylani let her eyes close, feeling the built-up tension slowly dissolve. She had no idea what lay ahead, but right then, for the first time in ages, she felt a faint glimmer of hope. "So tell me a little bit about yourself," Sterling prompted, his gaze steady on the road. "It'll help our story. Where did you study? What is it you do for a living?" "I earned my degree in education." Kaylani began choosing her words with care. "I always wanted to be an elementary school teacher. But after we married, my husband insisted a teacher's salary was insignificant and that I was better off staying at home. I do some freelance work now, writing copy for websites. A noble profession, teaching." Sterling nodded with approval. "A shame. And how long have you and your husband been together?" 3 years. Kalani sighed. "At first everything was wonderful. He was attentive and caring, and then I'm not sure what changed. Perhaps I did, or he revealed his true self." "Likely the latter," Sterling noted. "People don't truly change, they just stop pretending." Kaylani grew silent, her gaze drifting out toward the window. Then she added softly, "His name's Cordell. Cordell Banks. He is a contractor. He owns a small construction firm. He is always talking about moving up, finding big contracts, and networking with investors. To him, it is all work, money, and status. And I am just an accessory. I have to look perfect, behave correctly, and never embarrass him in front of important people, you know." Sterling glanced at her sideways. "Banks, did you say construction firm?" "Yes." Kaylani nodded. "Why?" "Nothing." Sterling frowned, as if remembering something. The name just sounded familiar. In my industry, everybody knows everybody. It's a small circle. He paused, then added gently, well, then Kaylani fate can arrange things very strangely. Perhaps tonight will change everything for you and maybe even for him as well. Is your granddaughter real? Kaylani decided to shift the topic. Does she help you often? Amara. Sterling smiled. Yes. She's amazing, so smart and responsible, studying to be a lawyer too. She says she wants to work at my company, help with contracts. I am so proud of her. Do you have other children besides the daughter? I had a son. Sterling's voice grew hushed. He died in a car crash 15 years ago, so Amara is my only grandchild, my only joy. To be truthful, my daughter lives separately. We rarely see each other. She has her own life and business, but Amara visits me often. We drink tea and we talk. Kilani felt her heart ache with empathy. This successful man, wealthy, had his own losses and pains, but he had not become bitter or closed himself off. On the contrary, he still continued helping others. Here we are, Sterling announced, turning towards a large building with a sign that read, The Summit. Kilani recognized the restaurant, one of the most expensive establishments in the entire city, known for its rooftop views and high-end soul fusion food. She had not been here, only seen photos on Instagram. Cordell promised to take her here for their anniversary a couple of times, but that promise remained only a promise. Sterling stopped his car in the valet lane and switched off the engine. He turned to Kalani, studying her carefully. We have about 10 more minutes. Listen, I understand that you're soaked, but perhaps you can freshen up a little. There are wipes inside the glove compartment, and on the back seat there ought to be Amara's spare jacket. It's about your size. Kilani nodded, then reached for the glove box. She took out some wet wipes, wiping her face and smoothing her hair. Sterling handed a dark blue blazer over the seat. It was stylish and clearly expensive. Thanks. Kaylani slipped out of her drenched windbreaker and eased into the blazer. It was slightly oversized, but it suited her surprisingly well. A vast improvement. Sterling approved with a nod. Now the most crucial part is to act naturally. No one is here to cross-examine you. Perhaps a couple of polite inquiries if they should ask at all. Just remain close to my side, smile, and everything will go smoothly. Kaylani inhaled deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. I'll try my best. They emerged from the car and approached the restaurant entrance, with Kaylani walking closely by Sterling's side, attempting to ignore the sheer absurdity of the entire situation. Just half an hour ago, she had been trekking through a downpour on the highway. Now she was entering an opulent restaurant, feigning to be a stranger's granddaughter. At the doorway, the maitre d', a tall gentleman in a flawless suit, greeted them. Good evening, Mr. Vance. He offered a subtle bow as he spoke. Your table is prepared. The other guests have already arrived and are awaiting you. Thank you, Michael. Sterling nodded as they walked through the impressively spacious hall, with towering ceilings and crystal chandeliers. Kaylani found herself looking all around as everything emanated pure luxury and taste. Sumptuous velvet drapes, deep pile carpets, and the soft melody of live jazz from a corner. Elegantly attired patrons sat at their tables, murmuring in quiet conversations. The maître d' then led them to a private room, more intimate but just as elegant. 4 men were already seated at a long table draped with a snow-white cloth. 3 of the gentlemen were approximately Sterling's age, over 60 years old, distinguished in their expensive suits, and then the 4th. Kaylani went rigid, the floor seeming to vanish beneath her. The 4th man was Cordell. It was her husband, sitting at the head of the table and leaning back casually in his chair, a glass of water in his hand, murmuring something to his neighbor with that peculiar smile Kaylani recognized all too well. A professional manufactured smile, and as his eyes drifted toward the doorway where she and Sterling were standing, that practiced smile froze upon his face. For 1 second, time itself seemed to halt. Cordell stared at Kaylani with wide, disbelieving eyes, and in them she saw surprise, utter confusion, and another emotion, fear. Kaylani felt her own heart begin to pound at a frantic pace. What on earth was he doing in this place? How was any of this possible? Bishop Eldridge, one of the elder gentlemen, rose to greet them with a wide smile. At last, we've been anticipating your arrival. Sterling grasped his hand. My apologies for the small delay, Bishop. The traffic, as you know. Oh, nonsense, everything's fine, Eldridge said dismissively, looking Kaylani over. And this is, I assume, the famous granddaughter you were telling us about. Yes, this is my Amara. Sterling placed an arm around Kaylani's shoulders, his voice resonating with such genuine warmth that for a second even she believed their familial bond. She agreed to join me tonight. My bright girl, a student. Very nice indeed. Eldridge nodded gallantly. Please have a seat. Sterling pulled a chair out for Kaylani and she sank down into it, fighting the urge to look toward Cordell, though she could feel his intense drilling gaze on her. Sterling took the seat to her left, while on her right sat another of the older gentlemen who introduced himself as Mr. Beauregard, the financial director. So, gentlemen, Bishop Eldridge started once all were settled. For the sake of order, let's have introductions. I am Bishop Eldridge and I represent the investors. Allow me to introduce my colleague, Mr. Beauregard, our financial manager, and this gentleman, he gestured to the third man opposite, is Thaddeus Moore, our lead architect. The three men nodded in succession. Kaylani returned a timid smile, carefully averting her gaze from Cordell's direction. Finally, Eldridge's attention shifted to Cordell. And this is Cordell Banks, a youthful yet exceptionally promising contractor whose firm we are considering as the executor for the project's construction phase. Cordell's smile was tight, his head tilting in a brief acknowledgement. For the first time, Kaylani risked a direct glance at him. He looked pale, with small beads of sweat forming on his brow. Their gazes locked for a fleeting moment, and in his eyes, Kaylani read a desperate plea. Be silent. Do not reveal a thing. And you, Mr. Vance. I presume you will be serving as the general contractor. Eldridge continued with the introductions. Your company, Vance Global, holds a sterling reputation. You possess the experience, the connections, and the necessary standing. That is the very reason we arranged this meeting today, to review the details and understand your vision for this collaboration. Naturally, Sterling replied with composure. I am prepared to discuss every aspect, but first, perhaps we could order our dinner. All this talk of business and my dear girl here must be famished. He gave Kaylani's hand a paternal pat, and she offered a grateful nod in return. Truthfully, she had no appetite. Her stomach was a tight knot of pure anxiety. A waiter presented the menus and they began selecting their dishes. Kaylani robotically pointed to the first item she saw, without even glancing at the description. Her entire focus was fixed on Cordell, seated diagonally, who was visibly struggling to maintain his composure. Well then, gentlemen, Bishop Eldridge announced, placing his menu aside. He laced his fingers on the table. Now let's get down to business. This is a serious project, a mixed-use residential complex. It involves 3,000 units infrastructure park zones, a 3-year term, and the budget, as you are aware, is quite substantial, and it's vital for us to know we are partnering with truly dependable individuals who also share our core values. And what specific values are you referring to? Sterling asked, reclining in his chair. Family, Eldridge stated with conviction, responsibility and integrity. You must understand, Mr. Vance, I am a man of traditional principles. It is vital to me that a partner is more than just an astute businessman, but also a person of character, one who can build strong personal relationships just as well as professional ones. That is my firmest conviction. I couldn't agree more, Sterling affirmed with a nod. Family is the bedrock. Without that solid foundation, any building will fall, correct? Exactly, Eldridge exclaimed in agreement. This is why I requested everyone bring their family. I wish to see the character of the people on our team. And you, I see, have a lovely granddaughter. He offered another smile to Kaylani, who did her best to return the gesture, feeling like a performer in a badly staged drama. And yourself, Mr. Banks? Eldridge said, turning his gaze to Cordell. You are also a married man, I believe. Cordell paused for a beat before nodding. Yes, for 3 years now. Excellent. Eldridge nodded with approval. So why did you not bring your wife along? It would have been a pleasure to meet her. Kaylani's heart seemed to stop for a moment. She observed Cordell struggling to keep her own expression completely blank. She had a prior engagement. He finally managed to stammer. Unfortunately, she was unable to join us. A true pity. Eldridge seemed genuinely disheartened. Well, it can't be helped. Perhaps another time. And what are your views on family values, young man? What principles do you hold in that regard? Cordell cleared his throat. I believe family is profoundly important. It's a foundation, a critical support system. I strive to be a devoted husband and to provide for my wife. A rage began to simmer within Kaylani. Provide for her, a devoted husband. This was the man who had forced her from the car into a downpour barely an hour ago, and now he just sat there, lying directly to the faces of these respected gentlemen. Sterling turned to Kailani, asking softly, Are you all right, my dear granddaughter? You seem a little pale. Startled, Kailani was pulled from her thoughts. Yes, I'm perfectly fine. Granddad just a bit weary. The word granddad came out with great difficulty as though her tongue fought against it. But Sterling gave her hand a reassuring squeeze under the table. The appetizers arrived looking absolutely exquisite, consisting of beautifully arranged seafood. Mr. Beauregard began discussing the project's financial model, and the discussion transitioned smoothly to technical specifics. Kaylani sat in silence, mechanically prodding her salad with her fork. Cordell was also quiet, only occasionally adding a comment, but it was obvious his mind was completely elsewhere. Tell me, Mr. Banks. Bishop Eldridge spoke up again unexpectedly. Do you have any children? Not at the moment. Cordell answered, his voice laced with uncertainty. Do you plan on it? Well, yes, certainly in the future we are. Right. Eldridge nodded. Children are the very meaning of life. You see, I have 3 grandchildren and I simply can't picture my life without them. Sterling smiled. I have just 1 granddaughter, but she means more to me than anything on this earth. Isn't that right, Amara? He looked at Kailani again with such affection that, for a fleeting moment, she wished it were all real, that she truly had such a kind and wise grandfather, so very caring. It's true, she replied softly. Thaddeus Moore, the architect who had been quiet until now, abruptly leaned in and eyed Cordell. And what is it that your wife does, if I may ask? Cordell sputtered on his water, coughed, and dabbed his mouth with a napkin. She's a writer. She works from home. Oh, interesting. Moore nodded. So, she is a modern, independent woman. That is excellent. And do you fully support her in this, or would you prefer she simply managed the household? Kaylani tensed up, awaiting his response. Cordell was clearly at a loss for words. His gaze darted from one man to the next as he desperately tried to discern what the correct answer would be. Of course I support her. He finally managed to get out. The most important thing is that a person does what they love. Wise words. Eldridge approved. So you have equality in your family. You consult one another and make decisions jointly. Yes, of course. Cordell nodded as Kalani noticed a vein throbbing at his temple. Sterling took a slow sip of water, observing Cordell intently, then asked casually, as if an afterthought. And how do you manage situations when disagreements arise within the family? How do you resolve them? Cordell went rigid. Kaylani did as well. When things get tense, we try to talk, Cordell replied cautiously. Find a compromise, talk, Sterling repeated, reflecting. That is the right way because, you see, I've known men who feel that providing for their family grants them certain entitlements, shall we say. To disregard courtesy, to lay down the law and give ultimatums. You are not that sort of man, are you? Absolutely not, Cordell rushed to say, though his voice faltered. Sterling held his gaze, his stare long and unwavering, then said slowly, Do you see Mr. Banks? My whole life has been in construction. And I've learned that if a foundation is cracked, if it's full of voids of lies, that building is not long for this world, regardless of the handsome exterior built upon it. That is true for buildings for individuals and for unions. His voice held such a steely resolve that the entire table fell silent. Bishop Eldridge eyed Sterling with surprise, then his gaze shifted to Cordell. "Mr. Vance, what is your point?" he inquired. Sterling placed his glass down and faced Eldridge directly. "My point is that 1 hour ago while driving here I found a woman on the motorway. She was drenched cold to the bone, deep in a state of shock. Her husband had put her out of the car in the middle of the highway during a downpour following a fight and just drove away." A sudden stillness fell over the table. Eldridge frowned deeply. "What is the meaning of this story?" Sterling laid a hand on Kaylani's shoulder. "This woman is not my granddaughter. Her name is Kaylani, and she is the wife of Cordell Banks." The silence that descended upon the room was utterly crushing. Cordell went entirely pale. His hands, which were resting on the table, started to quake. There has to be some kind of error," he stammered. "I don't comprehend, I just don't." Sterling simply lifted a brow. "All right, I will make it plain. Just a half-hour ago, you told us what a superb husband you happen to be, how you cherish your wife and treasure your family. The reality is you abandoned her in the dark, on a deserted highway in a storm. The very woman who put her faith in you wed you and gave you 3 years of her life." "Mr. Vance, you are misinterpreting this." Cordell attempted to argue, his voice breaking. "It was only a disagreement, a normal domestic squabble." "Ordinary?" Sterling's voice boomed. "You think it's just normal to force another human being from a car on a main road? Is that really your definition of a normal quarrel?" Bishop Eldridge leaned back slowly in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. His expression was unreadable, yet the look he gave Cordell had become severe. "Mr. Banks," he began, his tone like ice, "is any of this true?" Cordell started to speak, then stopped. His frantic gaze darted between Sterling, Eldridge, and then to Kalani. He was desperately searching for an escape, any excuse, but came up empty. We had a fight," he finally managed to say. "She left on her own. I did not leave on my own." Kalani stated, her voice soft but resolute, breaking her silence for the evening. "You ordered me to leave. You said, 'Take a walk, perhaps it will clear your head.'" Every gaze in the room fixed on her. Kalani felt her hands start to shake. But she pressed on. "You forced me from the vehicle, drove off, and left me to walk alone in the rain on that road, uncertain if I would even reach the city. Without Mr. Vance, I can't imagine what my fate would have been." "That's enough, Kaylani." Cordell forced a patronizing smile. "You are being overly dramatic. I only wanted you to cool down a bit. Cool down." A tide of rage surged within Kalani, one held back for months, for years. "I might have frozen. I might have been struck by a car. You were indifferent. You simply did not care." "Heavens, Kalani, don't cause a scene." Cordell anxiously wiped his face. "We can sort this out when we get home." "No, not here. Not now." "Then when is the time?" Her voice quivered. "When you're screaming at me once more. When you're calling me ungrateful, saying you dragged me from the gutter, and I fail to show my thanks." Bishop Eldridge let out a heavy sigh and rose from his seat. "Gentlemen, I believe this meeting has concluded." "Bishop, wait." Cordell leaped up, extending a hand. "This is just a misunderstanding. I can explain." "I require no explanation," young man Eldridge interjected sharply. "I have seen all I need to with my own eyes. A man who treats his wife in such a manner is no reliable partner. Our arrangement is terminated." Cordell glanced around the table, confused and seeking support from Mr. Beauregard and Thaddeus Moore, who were quietly collecting their things, deliberately avoiding his desperate gaze. Mr. Vance Eldridge then addressed him. "We shall be in touch soon to discuss our future collaboration, excluding the involvement of Mr. Banks." "Certainly," Sterling agreed with a nod. "Thank you, Bishop. My schedule is open." The three gentlemen then proceeded to the exit. Cordell was left standing by the table, his pale face contorting. He stared at Kalani, his eyes a clear reflection of his rage and despair. Yui seethed, "You've ruined everything. You wrecked a deal I spent the past 6 months building." "I ruined nothing," Kalani replied, her voice tired. "You did this to yourself with your very own hands." Cordell moved toward her, but Sterling swiftly stepped between them. "Young man, I suggest you depart immediately." "She is my wife," Cordell yelled. "I have every right." "You have no rights here." Sterling cut in, his tone icy. "You forfeited those rights when you abandoned her on the highway. Now leave before I summon security." Cordell remained for another moment, his breathing ragged, before turning abruptly and storming toward the exit. He paused at the door, turning back. "You will regret this, Kaylani. You have nothing now. No home, no money, and no me." "With pleasure," Kaylani replied softly. Cordell then slammed the door shut, and silence returned to the room. Kaylani collapsed into a chair as silent tears began to trace paths down her cheeks. Yet these were not tears of sorrow, but of pure relief, as though an immense burden had finally lifted from her spirit. Sterling took a seat beside her, offering a fresh handkerchief. "It's all right now, my dear. It's all in the past now." Kaylani accepted the handkerchief to dry her eyes, saying, "Thank you for all of this. If not for you." "Shh." Sterling gently cut her off. "There's no need for thanks. It was merely how events unfolded. Let's be on our way. We must figure out our next move." Kaylani nodded in agreement and rose to her feet. They departed the restaurant and stepped out onto the street. The downpour had ceased, leaving the air crisp and cool. Kaylani took a profound breath, her lungs embracing a cleanness they had been denied for so long. A feeling resembling freedom washed over her as Sterling started the car and exited the restaurant parking lot. They traveled in a comfortable silence for some time. Kalani gazed out the window, watching the city's evening lights flicker by, while he drove with focused intensity. Eventually, he broke the silence. "Kalani, do you have anywhere to stay tonight with relatives or friends?" Kaylani's mind raced. Her mother still resided in that same cramped apartment, the one they used to share. Returning was an option, but Kaylani dreaded having to explain everything, to recount her story and witness the pity in her mother's gaze. After 3 years of marriage, friends were a distant memory. Cordell had systematically isolated her from everyone she held dear. He would belittle her friends and create scenes after she saw them, or simply forbade her from leaving the house. He just forbade her, and over time Kaylani had gradually surrendered, ceasing to maintain contact. "I have my mother," she replied softly, "but I can't bring myself to go to her right now. Don't want to distress her by explaining everything." "I understand," Sterling nodded. "In that case, I have a proposition. I own a small apartment in Midtown. A 2-bedroom condo. I maintain it for Amara for her overnight city stays, but it's currently vacant. You are welcome to stay there for a bit until you decide what you're going to do next." Kaylani faced him, saying, "Mr. Vance, you've already done so much for me. I just can't accept." "You can," he stated firmly, "and you will. I promised I would help you, and I always keep my word. This is not charity or some kind of handout. I simply have the means to help someone in need, and so I am. That's all." Kaylani felt fresh tears begin to form. In just one evening, this stranger had demonstrated more genuine care and concern for her than her husband had shown in 3 years. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to properly thank you." "Live a good life," Sterling answered simply. "That will be the greatest thanks." They soon arrived on a quiet street in Midtown. It was a beautifully restored brownstone, elegant and impeccably maintained. Sterling guided Kaylani up to the 3rd floor and unlocked the apartment door. The interior was spotless and inviting, with a small but welcoming entrance hall, a luminous living area with a plush sofa and bookshelves, and a private bedroom with a large bed. It was all furnished with impeccable taste, yet it wasn't overly luxurious, simply comfortable. "This is where you can stay," Sterling said, as he switched on the lights. "You should find some food in the refrigerator. Amara was here not long ago. The linens are fresh. If there's anything you need, call me. Please don't hesitate. He then retrieved a business card from his pocket and handed it to Kalani. That's my number. I will swing by tomorrow. Bring some cash for now, and we can discuss the plan going forward. Right now, just rest. You survived a very hard day. Kalani took the offered card with trembling hands. Mr. Vance, Good night, Kalani. He cut in, his voice soft. Everything is going to be fine, I promise. As the door closed behind him, Kalani was suddenly left all alone, in the profound silence of this unfamiliar apartment. She moved slowly from room to room, unable to grasp the reality of what was happening. She entered the bathroom and saw her reflection staring back, a ghostly pale face and bloodshot eyes. Her hair was a mess and she looked exhausted, but a newfound gleam shone in her eyes, the gleam of hope. Kaylani took a steaming shower, rinsing away the traces of that dreadful day. She donned a terry cloth robe she discovered in the closet and sank into the bed. The mattress was plush, the pillows smelled clean. Kaylani closed her eyes, and for the first time in countless months, she drifted off peacefully, free of fear or anxiety. The morning arrived sunny and brilliant. Kaylani awoke to the sunlight filtering through the curtains and for a brief moment couldn't remember where she was. Then it all returned to the previous evening, the argument, the rain, and meeting Sterling Vance. The commotion at the restaurant. She sat up in the bed, hugging her knees. What now? How do I live on... The doorbell rang. Kalani pulled her robe tighter and went to answer it. On the doorstep stood Sterling, holding a large bag. Good morning, he said with a smile. I've brought you a change of clothes. I asked Amara to select something suitable and also breakfast. He raised a second bag, fresh bagels, cream cheese, and coffee. Kaylani stepped aside, letting him inside the apartment. It's so early. Thank you, I'm an early riser. Sterling shrugged. Up at 6 a.m. already. Let's head to the kitchen, have breakfast, and talk. They sat at the small kitchen table. Sterling laid out the bagels, butter, jam, and cheese. Kaylani simply looked at it all and felt a knot forming in her throat. When was the last time anyone had ever cared for her this way? Go on and eat, don't be shy, Sterling gently urged while pouring coffee. And as you eat, I'll explain the plan I've come up with for you. Kaylani took a bite of her bagel and listened. First, about housing. Sterling began. This apartment is yours to use for now, for a minimum of 3 months. In that time, you can get back on your feet, secure a job, and save for your own home. I'll handle the utilities, don't concern yourself with that. Mr. Vance, wait. I haven't finished, he interrupted, raising a hand. Second, a job. My office requires an administrator, someone to welcome clients, take calls, and manage documents. It is not a complex role, but the position is stable with a decent salary. If you accept, you could start next week. Kaylani looked at him, her eyes wide. You're actually offering me a job? Yes. He nodded calmly. I truly do need an administrator. This isn't a position I've invented. The woman before went on maternity leave about a month ago, and we've been unable to find her replacement since. So in reality, you would be doing me a favor by accepting. A warmth spread through Kaylani's chest, a job, a home, a chance for a new beginning. And third, Sterling went on, a lawyer. You're going to need to file for a divorce, and you'll want to do it properly so your husband can't make any claims against you. I know a very good attorney. She will help you with all the paperwork. That cost is also on me, don't worry. Kaylani placed her cup on the table, because her hands had begun to shake. Why are you doing this for me? I am a stranger to you, just a random encounter. Sterling took a sip of his coffee, then met her gaze directly. I mentioned my daughter to you yesterday, how she suffered in her own marriage and I failed to help her soon enough. 20 years have passed since that day, but I still cannot forgive myself. And do you know what I have realized in all these years? That kindness is not something you should put off for tomorrow. When you encounter someone in distress and possess the means to aid them, you must act at once, because a later time might never come. Tears streamed down Kaylani's face as she whispered, I don't know what to say. Don't say a thing, Sterling replied, offering her a napkin. Simply say yes. Accept the position. Stay here. Leave that man and forge a new path for yourself. You are still so young. You're intelligent with your whole future before you. Refuse to let your past define you. Wiping her tears, Kaylani firmly nodded her head. I accept. I accept it all. Thank you so much, Mr. Vance, for everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Kaylani met the lawyer Sterling suggested, a formidable black woman in her 50s, and an intensely sharp gaze. She absorbed the entire story, posed precise questions, and promised the divorce proceedings would be swift and without complication. You share no children and there are virtually no marital assets. The lawyer clarified. The apartment lease is solely in your husband's name, as is the car. Therefore, there is nothing to divide. We will file the petition, and in about 1 month, you will be free. Cordell phoned Kaylani repeatedly. Initially, he yelled, hurled accusations, and insisted she come back. Then he attempted to appeal to her pity, claiming he missed her, promising to change completely, suggesting they could begin anew. Kaylani heard him out, marveling at how she had once succumbed to such manipulations. Now his tactics felt so transparent, so painfully obvious. She calmly informed him that their relationship had ended, she was proceeding with the divorce, and desired no further contact with him. Following the 5th call, Cordell's constant harassment ceased. 1 week later, Kaylani began her new job. Vance Global's offices were situated on the 7th floor of a contemporary business complex. It boasted a vast lobby with panoramic windows and a welcoming reception area where her new desk was placed. Sterling introduced her to her colleagues, a group of friendly individuals who accepted the new arrival warmly, asking no prying questions. The job itself proved less daunting than Kaylani had anticipated. Her duties included handling calls, arranging client appointments, managing the database, and ordering supplies. She swiftly found her rhythm, mastered the necessary software, and memorized the names of regular clients. And crucially, she enjoyed the work. She loved feeling useful, like an essential part of the team. Evenings were spent back in her own apartment, where she would cook dinner for one and read books she had long neglected. She phoned her mother, assuring her that everything was going well, explaining she had a new job and was no longer living with Cordell. Her mother was initially worried, but Kaylani gently soothed her fears, promising to visit soon to explain everything in detail. Occasionally, Sterling's granddaughter, Amara, a bright young woman, would visit. An energetic 22-year-old with wild curls and mischievous eyes, they formed a quick and easy friendship. Amara would chat about her university life, her boyfriend, and her ambitious future plans. Kaylani listened, feeling a sense of positive envy. This was how life was meant to be lived, lightly, freely, without concern for judgment. 1 month later, the court hearing was a swift formality. Cordell didn't appear, dispatching a representative instead. Kaylani was handed the final divorce decree and felt the final burden lift from her soul. She was no longer defined as a wife, just Kaylani, and the feeling was utterly wonderful. Sterling invited her to lunch at the very restaurant where her new life had started. They took a familiar table right by the window. As Kaylani gazed at the city awash in autumn light, Sterling asked with a warm smile, "How do you feel?" Kaylani replied with pure honesty for the first time in ages. "Free, genuinely free." "That's good." He nodded. "Any plans for the future?" Kaylani considered. "I want to save enough to rent my own place, just a small studio, but it would be mine. I also want to finish my recertification courses, perhaps go back to teaching someday. Mostly, I just want to live to be happy without fear or constant anxiety." "Those are wonderful plans," Sterling affirmed, "and I'm certain you will succeed. You are a strong woman, Kaylani. It's just that before you had no one to tell you so." "I've missed that," Kaylani smiled. "Having a grandfather figure who supports and believes in me. Well, I'm not planning on going anywhere." Sterling shrugged. "Consider me your adopted grandfather. Amara already calls you her sister, so we're all one family now." Kaylani felt her eyes begin to well up, but these were tears of happiness, not sorrow. Later that evening, as she returned to the apartment, She moved to the window and gazed down at the street. Rain was falling just as it had on that dreadful night. But now Kailani felt no fear. She was standing in warmth and safety in her own haven, and the rain beyond the glass seemed less like a menace and more like simple rain, a part of a world she no longer feared. 6 months passed, and Kalani finally rented her own apartment, a cozy studio on the edge of Buckhead. Sterling was there to help her move. Amara arrived with houseplants as a welcoming gift. The three of them shared tea in the new space, and Kalani looked at them and realized this was true happiness, not found in a large flat or costly possessions or the status of being a wife, but in her freedom and being with people who valued her simply for who she was. Cordell never reappeared in her life. Occasionally whispers would reach her that he had remarried some younger woman. Kailani felt no anger or bitterness, just a faint sense of pity for the girl, and a hope she'd find the strength to leave, if needed. If her own situation turned sour. Then another 6 months on Kalani enrolled in teacher recertification courses and started preparing to re-enter her profession. Sterling offered his full support, reminding her that great teachers were always needed, and assured her she would absolutely find a position. Then one evening, as Kalani sat out on her little balcony, with a warm cup of tea gazing at the stars, she had a sudden realization her life had truly begun again. That awful night in the rain hadn't been an ending but a new beginning, the start of the journey back to her true self. She recalled Sterling Vance's words from their first meeting, "Everything is going to be all right, I promise." And he had not been lying. Things truly did get better. Not instantly and not without struggles, but slowly her life began to right itself, becoming filled with purpose and joy. Kailani finished her tea, stepped inside her apartment, and opened up her laptop. She started composing an email to Sterling for no reason other than to thank him once more, share her news, and tell him her plans. He always responded to her messages, inquiring about her life and offering his counsel. "Dear Mr. Vance," she started to type, "I want to thank you again, though it won't be the first time, nor likely the last. Thank you for pulling over on the road that day, for having faith in me when I had none in myself, for revealing that true kindness still exists and that good people are willing to help. Without expecting a single thing in return, you transform my life, and I vow not to fail you. I will become the person you envisioned in me." From that rainy night. Rereading her words, she pressed send and smiled. Life carried on, and it was beautiful. Did you enjoy the story? Tell me which city you're from. Let's connect in the comments. If this story moved you, you can support me with a super thanks. It allows me to continue sharing more tales like this one. Thank you deeply for your kind support. I can't wait to read your thoughts. You'll now see 2 other life stories on your screen that I truly recommend. My channel is full of many more. Don't forget to subscribe. Until our next life story, with love and profound respect.